All right, on siblings, approximately 77% of American children have one or more siblings, and conflict between siblings is pretty common. Higher sibling conflict is linked to increased depressive and delinquency symptoms. That being said, again, conflict is going to be pretty normal between siblings. Higher sibling intimacy is related to more prosocial behavior. Sibling relationships in adolescence are not as close, not as intense, and are more egalitarian than they were in childhood. When siblings are in conflict, what parents try to do is most will commonly try to intervene and resolve the conflict. Some will ignore and just figure it out yourselves. And then the least common is to tell them to just physically stand up to each other. What the text talks about is the idea of training parents to mediate siblings' conflicts. And it increases the understanding of those conflicts, and it can reduce the conflict if you actually can guide them through that process of trying to figure things out. Some of these things are going to be related to, possibly anyways, be related to birth order. Birth order has been shown to be linked to personality characteristics. For example, firstborn children are described as more adult-oriented, helpful, conforming, self-controlled. When these birth order differences are reported in the research, however, the effects are usually pretty small. So yeah, there may be, in some families, this first kid acts like this, the second kid acts like this, but those effects are pretty small. So you don't want to just automatically assume, oh, you're the second kid, you must be a rebel, all that kind of stuff. There's also some benefits for being the only child. They are often achievement-oriented and display a desirable personality, especially in comparison with later borns from children from large families, which kind of makes sense. If you've only got one kid, you're able to concentrate on them. But it also makes sense too if you have a sibling, because then you're having a kind of like a peer relationship right there in the house all the time. So it goes both ways. On working parents, maternal employment is now a part of the modern American life. You don't just have the dad that goes out to work every day and the mom's at home, but most families are not able to survive like that. Work can have both positive and negative effects. Parents that are in poor working conditions are more irritable at home, and they're going to engage in less effective parenting. So that definitely makes sense. If you're happy at your job, you come home and you're going to be in a good mood, you're going to be a better parent. The children's academic and social emotional functioning benefit when fathers and mothers are able to take similar amounts of time off to care for the family members. On the divorced parents, many children born to married parents in the U.S. will experience a divorce. Children from divorced families do show poorer adjustment than children from non-divorced families. That being said, the majority of children do not have serious problems, however. There are many factors that are involved in determining how divorce influences a child's development. For example, problems may stem as much from the marital conflict as from the divorce. So if the parents are fighting all the time, it's almost like in some cases it's going to be better for them to actually be divorced for the kids. Adolescent adjustment is improved when the divorced parents have a harmonious relationship and use authoritative parenting. Obviously, if your parents, even though if they get divorced, if they still kind of get along well enough to communicate and all that kind of stuff, it's definitely going to be easier on the kids. Children who are socially mature and responsible, who show fewer behavioral problems, and who have an easy temperament are better able to cope with the divorce. And again, yes, joint custody arrangements, those are going to work a lot better if the parents get along. Also on divorce, the moms usually experience a much more substantial loss of their pre-divorce income, but that difference is getting smaller. So we move from the divorced into step families. And about half of the children whose parents are divorced will have a step parent within 4 years of that parental separation. Some recent trends in the U.S., older adults are far more likely to remarry than younger adults. Men marry more often than women. So these remarried parents have to do several different things. They have to define and strengthen their current marriage. They have to renegotiate the biological parent-child relationships, and they have to establish the step-parent, stepchild, and step-sibling relationships. So there's a lot of things going on there. And so, yes, as with children in divorced families, they show some adjustment problems. Children in step families are going to show this too sometimes. However, the majority of them do not have problems. The text talks a little bit about gay and lesbian parents, and so you can look through that a little bit more if you'd like. One thing that popped out to me was the idea that over 1/3 of all lesbian and gay couples are parents. There's a figure 9, that goes into that a little bit more if you're interested. And just kind of as an FYI too, the majority of children that have gay and lesbian parents have a heterosexual orientation. There's also a section on culture and its influences on the family. If you'd like to read through that, it talks about what should the father's role be that is going to be dependent on the culture that you're in. How should the children be disciplined? And they do talk about SES. We've talked about this a few times too. Low-income families have less access to resources, nutrition, healthcare, protection from danger, education, and that is going to have effect on development. The lower SES parents, they try to get their kids to conform to society's expectations. They create a home in which it's clear that the parents have authority over the children, so they're going to be more authoritarian from low SES backgrounds. They're going to use more physical punishment, and they're going to be more directive and less conversational with their children. I think I talked about this in an earlier chapter. The idea that if you're low SES and maybe you're having to work 2 jobs, and so you've worked 80 hours a week, you come home at night, you're not going to spend a lot of time being a good authoritative parent, possibly. You might just have to be like, do what I told you to do because that's what I said. And you have to move on because you're tired. Compared to someone that's only working 30 to 40 hours a week. They have lots of money and resources and things of that nature. With the high SES parents, they're more concerned with developing children's initiative. They create a home in which the children are more like equal participants. So it's not necessarily your boss and you're below me. We're in here together. They're less likely to use physical punishment, and they are less directive and more conversational. We've talked about this throughout the chapter. And then at the very end, they talk a little bit about SES and parents in these different socioeconomic groups and how they think about education. The middle and upper income parents think of education that's something that should be mutually encouraged by the parents and the teachers. So the parents are at home talking to the kids about things like going to college. The low income parents are more likely to view education as the teacher's job. So from low income parent may not talk to their kid as much about going to college, and they're going to place that duty on the teacher. Teacher might not take care of it either. So yes, it's going to be more beneficial if the parents and the schools are working together to try to get that kid to go, wherever they need to go with their academic achievements. All right, that's it for chapter 14. Thank you for listening.